I'll tell you what, these eyes are ridiculous looking. It's a freaking rectangle right there. This is a whole new portrait to me. This is something that I've never done before, drawing rectangular eyes. With cats, there's slivers, but these were just very different. Like, it was kind of creepy looking when you first start because it's just the eye first. So there's not really anything else to it besides that. So anyway, moving on. You can see that I worked on the highlights in the eyes. That's super, super, super important. You want to make sure that that's there, as well as any little reflections, because that is what makes or breaks the whole portrait. If your eyes don't look realistic, nice and glossy, and has good reflection in there, then it's just going to look very flat and lackluster overall. So focus on that. That is going to take you a lot longer to do than anything else, but that's okay. The more you practice, the better you'll get, and the faster you'll get as well. So the first couple of layers too, I'm using a mixture of warm tones and cool tones. This is what I say to my students all the time. Use a mixture of warm tones and cool tones. If you don't know what those are, cool tones are things like blues, purples, greens. Warm tones are orange, yellow, and I don't know, not pink, whatever it is. But that having that contrast there actually really helps make that portrait pop a whole lot more. So I didn't really finish much more in terms of around the eyes because I wanted to go left to right. The reason why I do that is because I'm right-handed and I want to prevent smudging as much as possible. So I go mostly to the left, but I usually like to start with the eyes first. So I started with the eyes, and then now I'm going to the left, to this left ear right here. And really the trick is to just follow along with the direction of the fur that you see here. So you can see it's all over the place, and that's okay. Just focus on where it's really, really dark, and then leave room for the lighter areas. So don't get too detailed just yet. Just work on those strokes. Use kind of these longer, more wispy looking strokes, and just start building up your layers using a variety of more warm tones at this point, but there is a little bit of cool tones in there. Now with the paintbrush, you can see I'm using mineral spirit oil. I use this for all of my portraits. So you're going to see that paintbrush very often. You can use the same method if you want to prevent ruining the paper over time by using too much pressure, and also prevent hand cramps. That is the biggest lifesaver for me because I actually developed a little bit of carpal tunnel over the years from drawing because I was drawing too heavy. And once I figured out that I can use this mineral spirit oil on specific paper, such as watercolor paper, it was just a huge game changer. Not only that, but it also creates more vibrant colors, and you can draw back on top of it, and it actually helps to focus more on the details of it too. So you can see I'm using a light blue. The light blue, I use it mostly in more of the highlighted areas, and it already looks way more realistic because it has that nice contrast between the cool tones and the warm tones. You can also use white if you don't have a pale blue, because white has a cooling effect as well. And if you're worried about kind of having a limitation on colors, that's okay, because what you can do is use a variety of the colors that you have to blend them a little bit more. And then that will kind of create newer colors if you do blend some of those together. So just play around and have fun with the selection that you have. Don't worry about having a giant variety of color pencils to begin with. But I do recommend having no less than 5 color pencils per portrait, because the more variety of color pencils that you have, even if it's lighter browns and darker browns, or lighter blues or different shades of blues, that's going to make your portrait look more realistic over time as you start to build up those layers. I will say the downside of using the mineral spirit oil is that the black doesn't get nearly as black as I would like it to be if I use too much of it. So just be mindful of that. Try to use the black first and then use the mineral spirit oil and then use black again to get it nice and dark. You could see here that it is nice and dark in some of those areas after I had applied the mineral spirit oil and then used black again. So just be mindful of that. It may look not nearly as dark as you want it to be. That also depends on the type of paper that you have. So I highly recommend getting some sort of watercolor paper, especially if it's a more of the higher series, the ones that are more fine and not have too much of a grain to it. And then for some of these lighter areas, yes, I'm going to use the mineral spirit oil and then lighten it up a little bit more with the white color pencil. That definitely helps a lot. Now, another trick you can use is burnish first after you've done a couple of layers. Burnishing is pretty much creating a waxy coating over the top of some of those layers, usually using lighter color pencils or just the white color pencil, and then using the mineral spirit oil. What that does is it doesn't darken what you have, because that oil will darken and saturate that section a little bit more. So if you use the, if you burnish first and then do the mineral spirit oil, it'll not darken it nearly as bad, but then you can go back over it with lighter color pencils too. So just be mindful of that. It's a good, helpful tip. Now, you could see that I'm drawing in the direction of the fur, and it's definitely all over the place, but it is very important to make sure that you are drawing in that same direction. Proportions is going to be a little bit difficult to be able to explain because I've been doing this for so long. I really just started out by trial and error. So you're going to probably end up having to do the same thing. What I like to do a lot of the time though is have a very light trace first, because it saves me a lot of time, but everything else is freehand. So it's almost second nature to me at this point. But when I first started, I had tried the grid method. I had tried freehanding. I had tried simply just tracing, but like every single detail. I did not like tracing every single detail because that limited me to my imagination and my creativity. So I only just did it with like, you know, the essentials, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, and that's pretty much it. All the rest of it is all freehand, and it really is up to looking at the reference image and kind of like what I do is I will look from one section, one shape, and try to compare it to the next shape that you're drawing and see, okay, is this shape too big compared to this one, or is it too small compared to this one? It's kind of, I'll tell you what, it's just really hard to explain how to understand proportions and do it without you actually practicing it yourself. But moving on here, so I left a lot of the lightness in the top of the head there. So there actually is a lot of blank space. You can still do that. A lot of the time I don't do that. So I don't know why. I guess I was just kind of doing something a little bit new here. But the nose itself, so there's a lot of pink in there, and the nostrils are almost always black. But I do add a little bit of some browns in there just to, you know, make it not look so flat and so cold looking. But most of it really is just that pink color. There's a little bit of some burnt sienna in there. And then, yeah, add in that contrast with the lighter blues and a little bit of darker blue too. So like some darker gray blues. And the biggest thing that you want to pay attention to when it comes to nostrils and noses themselves, both nostrils will never look the exact same. No two sides of eyes, ears, nose, mouth will ever look the same. And that is the most important thing to remember, and try not to actually do and replicate yourself, because then it's not going to look realistic. It's just going to look like you copied and pasted. And it also just deters away from your growth of being able to make it look realistic with the differences between each side. So you can see that there's a lot of highlight in the nose, which I will go back over a little bit more too here in a little bit, but sometimes I like to move on just a little bit before I continue cleaning up. But you can see this white stuff that I'm using. It is actually this white paste. It's not necessarily paint, but it's from the Copic, I think it's Copic brand. And it's just this paste that I like to dip into to create some of these highlights. It's very, very rare that I ever use this stuff because I like to be able to just have colored pencils only, and then I'll use the mineral spirit oil. But I like the fact that I'm only using one medium instead of a variety. I like simple, honestly. So if the more simple it is, the easier for me to be able to explain it to other people, and the easier overall just the understanding of how to use color. Like, I want to master it. I want to master one medium at a time. So that's what I'm doing here. And it's also a lot less messy because color pencils are a lot easier to clean up, and there's no spills, there's no nothing except for probably eraser shavings and a little bit of wax bloom in there, but that's about it. So this part is really fun because I'm using a variety of grays and a little bit of some like gray blues in there to build up some depth into this white. So it's pretty much white. Like the goats that you see in person they have white fur. So what do you do with white fur? A lot of people think that white fur is really difficult to draw, but it's actually black fur is more difficult for me to draw because there's so much pigmentation and there's so many colors that actually go into black fur compared to white fur. But the white fur is fun because you can add a variety of all these different colors. I even sometimes use like a very pale lilac color in some of the highlighted areas. And it just really makes the white pop out a lot more and have a good sense of depth compared to just using like a small variety. And then this mouth here, I know mouths are pretty difficult because you can either make them too crooked, too small, too big, but just use a good comparison. Like, okay, so where's the end of the mouth in comparison to the eye or the nose? Think about those things as you're going along, and don't make it look like it's just a single line, because you can see that the mouth on the left-hand side goes out more than the right-hand side. And that's completely okay because that is what it looks like in the reference image. And you can see that there's a little bit more highlight on the right-hand side than the left-hand side. So of course it's going to be more lighter and more blended on the right-hand side than the left. And the same thing applies to the chin. So to create a good sense of depth, you want to know where the highlights are and the lowlights and the shadows and the midtones, blah, blah, blah. But working with the direction of the fur is super important too. So that's what I did there. And then you can also use a sharp white color pencil to create some of those highlight bits of the fur as well, closer towards the end, because that'll work really well once you've used some of that mineral spirit oil and then use the white on top of it. It seems to grab the white better that way than if you just had a bunch of layers together. So this second ear, it's different than the first one. It's a different shape, different look, different fold. So it's not I think it's going to be a little bit more simple because you don't see the inner ear nearly as much. So I only just added a couple of layers and then used the mineral spirit oil. You don't have to have a lot of layers to be able to use the oil. Just a few until you kind of feel like, okay, this is probably it for the base layer. And then let's go ahead and use that so that we can start getting in that detail. So I'm using a lot of black for the tip because there is a lot of depth and black and brown in the tip of the ear there. But it's also important to make sure that you are showing the direction of the fur as well, even if it is super, super, super dark, because every single layer and every single direction, every single stroke counts. That's what matters the most, is remember that every single stroke does count, even if you don't have a sharp colored pencil and you're using a flat one and you're just really trying to get like the pigmentation down. The direction of the color pencil still matters, because you will still see that even after many, many, many layers. So do remember that as you're drawing your own portraits. And if you're struggling to come up with the right kind of colors to use, just play around with them. Like, get a little test strip of paper and play around with the colors first. Like I said, you want to have a minimum of 5 color pencils to begin with, and have a variety of different colors. Now, I also use a green color. It's like a raw umber color that I like to use for almost all of my portraits, even in some of these brightly colored ones, because what it does is the reflections of the natural environment around it. So a lot of the time these animals are being taken from outdoors, and there's a lot of natural green tones outside, even inside too, but mostly outside. So you'll see a lot of that. And I think having those more earthy green tones in some of the mid-tone areas, not necessarily the highlights or the low light areas, but the mid-tones, it really does help to make the portrait look a little bit more realistic, as if you're standing right there and seeing that animal. This neckline, pretty much the rest of this body is just going to be very straightforward, and it's going to go pretty fast. So that ends up happening a lot, is the face takes the longest, and then the neck and the rest of the body is very, very, very quick, because there isn't a whole lot to it. It's just a matter of getting the right direction of the fur, getting the shading, and the highlights down. So there's not a whole lot of detail that's really happening unless you're drawing paws or something like that. But that's still not a whole lot compared to drawing the eyes, the nose, the ears. So now you can kind of sort of relax. Maybe not necessarily, because you're still drawing the portrait. But the whole point of this is to just relax and have fun and enjoy the process and figure out the methods that you like the most. Because I know that my methods, not all color pencil artists use. I know that the tools that I use, not all color pencil artists use. So you really just have to figure out what works best for you. And then also, like, the same for the amount of pressure that you apply. So when I was teaching some of my students, I started to notice that even though I was teaching them, I saw that some people drew too heavy and some people drew too light. So I had to compensate based off of that single person and how they naturally draw. A lot of people naturally draw really light. So I'm able to just tell them, apply more pressure, build up those layers, get more layers in there, and don't hesitate, just get in there. But if you're drawing too heavy, I have to really work hard on those people to lighten up and to focus more on the details and not necessarily on pushing down so hard, because it's all about layering at this point. And if you can get those first couple of layers, but they're light, but not, they're just kind of medium. They don't have to be super light. And then use that mineral spirit oil, then you don't have to apply nearly as much pressure. And that can be really difficult for people over time with their hand, because it is a medium that you have to apply quite a lot of pressure if you don't know how to use certain materials properly. If you're interested in learning to draw, I do have a lot of different classes that are all online and at your own pace. So you can go and you click on whatever animal you want to draw. It's usually about a couple hours long. I have the directions that you can download, and all you have to do is just hit play, and then you can pause at your leisure if you want to take a break. But they're super in depth and they're really nice and fun to be able to learn from, because I also tell you what kind of color pencils I'm using for each step, and also telling you the techniques and the reasons why I'm using those colors. It's very similar to these videos, but more in depth on the type of colors and the reasons why I'm using those colors and the methods that I'm using. If you want to go more in depth with everything, I also have a 8-week program of learning how to draw your own pet. So it also gives you details on different types of fur, from texture to color. And it's all at your own pace as well, but you can also reach out to me and ask me questions along the way. So it's really fun and helpful. And I've actually had a lot of students tell me that they really improved after taking that 8-week course. You don't have to take it all within the 8-week. You can take some within the same week or take a break, whatever you want to do, but it's all at your own pace. That's all on my website, but the links for those will be down below as well. So like I said, this is actually going to take a lot faster, or be a lot faster, because there's just not a whole lot going on. But look at this. So I'm using a lot of dark shaded areas on the right hand side, and then it gets really light on the left hand side, which is kind of a contrast to the head there, because what's happening is the ear is creating a shadow over the neck. So the right hand side of the head is lighter than the left hand, but the shadow on the right hand side of the neck is created because of the ear. So pay attention to those details there, because that does matter. It's not always that the shadow is going to be on one specific side. And if you focus on, like, really when it's big areas like this, it's just a matter of getting that texture down and working on getting it blended really well. So using a variety of different colors will help to create a better sense of depth, like I always say. And you can actually see that in action right here, because I am using a variety of different warm tones, cool tones, browns, grays, blues, a little bit of some like purple sepia colors, just whatever I can get my hands on that look like it would work really well in this picture. That's what I'm doing. So we're almost done here. If you want to learn some tips and tricks, you can subscribe to my email list, which is listed down below. I send out tips and tricks on the weekly basis, as well as different blogs. But please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.